A couple of days ago, we talked about the Empire's actions on Gorman and why they chose specifically to commit an atrocity against the Gorman people rather than take some other approach in acquiring the minerals necessary to build what we assume is a vital component of the Death Star. Now, I'm not going to reiterate my points from that video, but in short, we know, at least according to Krennic, that invasive mining was the only way to reach the Gorman metal, and it was very likely that the planet would be, if not destroyed, at least rendered inhospitable. So they got to work with a propaganda campaign implied to have started long before the events of Andor Season 2. The people of Gorman, the Ghor, are painted as culturally distinct from the rest of the Empire with differing values and a sense of superiority. All of that, the manufacturing consent for the atrocities committed on the Gorman people, results in what we see with Episode 8. But here's the thing a lot of people are missing. It's the act and the broadcasting of the act, which is as important, if not more so, than the actual minerals on Gorman itself. And here's another truth. Krennic and the others may have been lying about the necessity for such violent mining methods. It could have been that there are other planets which had the same material, or they could have developed a synthetic alternative. I certainly don't think they were trying very hard, and I find it very likely that there were some form of alternatives. But here's the thing. The Empire was given an excuse, and now that they've done it once, they can do it again. And I was thinking about this when rewatching the heart-wrenching end to the episode where Drina is putting out that call for help.
The imperial murder of Gorman has begun. There are hundreds of bodies this moment. As I say these words, hundreds of murdered Gorman lay dead in Famo Plaza. Thousands more on the streets, more every minute. We're being destroyed. This is Gorman reaching for any open channel that can hear me. If you can hear me. If you believe in truth. If you have any faith left in truth.
When I noticed something I hadn't really before. In the final scene of Episode 8, we see Cyril's mother, Edie, watching the news on Gorman, and obviously it's a very emotional scene, but something else happens. The reporter says the following.
Questions are being asked about how an insurrection of this scale could be mounted without the aid and support of outside rebel assistance. In the days to come, as the imperial martyrs of Gorman are mourned, we're sure to learn a great deal more about what happened here today and the price we'll pay for our own safety.
We're sure to learn a great deal more about what happened today, and the price we'll pay for our own safety. Fascism is a difficult term to nail down, largely because a fascist regime is defined by a collection of things. Whether you think the Empire is fascist in particular or just authoritarian, the Empire here has certainly been employing a tool of fascists, that being the creation of a conspiracy and of an enemy, and in this case, an internal enemy. This is something Palpatine has done since his time as Chancellor, and even before. The Clone Wars were clearly manufactured to provide an external threat which would allow Palpatine to transform the Republic into the Empire. Slowly, he erodes the Republic's constitutional values through the threat of the CIS. No, I've got to stay on as Chancellor. These are extraordinary times. Later, he uses the manufactured conspiracy against his life by the Jedi to fully transform the Republic into the Empire, and we see Palpatine or the Empire nebulously repeat this approach again and again, whether in rumors of outside invaders, as mentioned in the Revenge of the Sith cross-section, to what we're seeing now in the brutal crackdown against the Gorman people. One thing you have to understand is that Palpatine probably doesn't hate the rebellion. Palpatine also would have built the Death Star without the rebellion ever existing. This is the entire point. What happens at Gorman is really a microcosm of what's been happening across the galaxy, i.e., as the ISB and the Empire says, they want an enemy. They want rebels who can be used to not just mine the mineral, which, yes, everyone is saying, but also further the Empire's hold on the galaxy. We see the so-called press helping the Empire along here. The idea of Ghormans being upstart, basically rebels, has, as I mentioned, been percolating through the public consciousness for probably nearly a decade at this point. And I truly believe that this sort of act is something Palpatine would have done simply for the sake of doing, to show the galaxy that there are enemies and that enemies will also be swiftly put down. That's part of the reason why I really like that the end speech, the call for help after the genocide, states the conspiracy was true, because that's what it was, a conspiracy. Where Palpatine really failed is in calculating how the people would respond to his actions. He always assumed that his grip was a little tighter and more secure than it actually was. I think in a way Palpatine would have even been okay with Mon Mothma speaking out and then silence, because again, he can point to the growing rebel threat as an excuse to continue to militarize and crack down on basically whomever he wants.
This Chamber's hold on the truth was finally lost on the Gorman Plaza. What took place yesterday, what happened yesterday on Gorman, was unprovoked genocide.
What Palpatine and his advisors are missing is that there are a lot of people who are seeing through the lies. It's not only Mon Mothma or Bail Organa, the plucky senators who've been speaking up against Palpatine now for 2 decades, who realized what happened was a genocide, pure and simple. And more importantly, it wasn't only them who were willing to fight back, because, well, one part of Palpatine's calculus is to control the average person through lies, propaganda, conspiracy theories, the creation of an enemy. The other part was that the Empire was overwhelmingly powerful. They had, over time, fully militarized to the point where the Empire was easily more powerful than any other single force within the galaxy. That was the entire point of the Tarkin doctrine. Realistically, no galactic government could strongly police every system. What the Empire could do, however, was create the appearance of infinite and overwhelming force. That's why stormtroopers, TIE fighters, Star Destroyers, they all look the same. There's also this idea that if you stand up, even if it takes the Empire some time, they will destroy you with overwhelming force. That's meant to keep people, systems in line. But what happened after Gorman is that the galaxy showed they weren't afraid. They weren't afraid to die. They weren't afraid to fight. They weren't afraid to openly stand up against the Emperor.
You think I'm crazy? Yes, I am. Revolution is not for the sane. Look at us. Unloved, hunted, cannon fodder. We'll all be dead before the Republic is back, and yet, here we are.
They not only saw through the lies, but also the fear, and that's why the message of hope in the show and in Rogue One is so important. Why it's also important that the characters die to be a part of a greater cause. This sort of sacrifice, this destruction of fear, even of dying, is something Palpatine, a man who lives solely for himself and for power, can never hope to understand. His inability to even conceive sacrifice leads to his downfall, not just here, but ultimately. And in the end, that's why it all comes back to hope, even hope after death. It's why things are so different after the destruction of the first Death Star. It was the ultimate symbol of everything we've been talking about. A force which can counter any resistance in the galaxy, a force which is fully unveiled after Palpatine drops even the pretense of lies, and it's destroyed by a plucky rebel group with stolen ships and a farmer. So yes, Palpatine did miscalculate, and he paid for that, thankfully for the galaxy at large. But it's important to remember that Gorman, or even real-world analogs, are not about necessarily the objectives we see. Massacring people at a protest isn't simply about dispersing the protest. It's about making people afraid and continuing the walk down a path which sees everyone under the boot of an authoritarian. That's what we've seen throughout Andor, people willingly giving up their liberties while a few people fight for freedom. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.